But we just wanted to talk about for like a moment, how do we enjoy these rights in light of liberty? Excuse me. Yeah. Excuse me.
So how do we enjoy these rights and liberties?
Yeah. So I like to look at it this way. All these rights are pieces of liberty that when you put them all together, they build this thing that we call liberty, right? You can't have liberty without life.
Yep.
If you don't have liberty to the property you own, do you really have liberty? If you can't defend it, right? If you don't have liberty of your conscience before God and it's just between you and God, do you really have it? If somebody can bind you, like we were just talking about, if they can bind you without your consent, are you really free? Right? So all of our rights come together and they help form what we call liberty, right?
Yeah. Sort of like an interlocking thing, right?
Yeah, I view it like a wall.
Yeah.
I view it like bricks. Each piece is building the whole wall called liberty.
That's a good analogy.
And that liberty defends us, protects us, right? So, just to restate from one of our other episodes, our working definition of liberty in light of what we just talked about, how rights fit into that.
Yeah.
Liberty, and again, we tried to base this on a biblical worldview.
Yep.
Liberty is not the license to do whatever you want. Instead, liberty is the ability and responsibility to do what God says is right and good and to enjoy all that God has given individuals to enjoy without the oppression or tyranny, whether from individuals or governments.
Nice.
So these gifts for everyone who's listening, these gifts from God, enjoy them, protect them, take up your responsibility and love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Protect his rights and liberty. Protect them.
Right.
Stand up for each other.
Right. Whether that be through, local government or voting or, just in your community, like on a social level, you know what I mean? Like all those things are important.
Yeah. And that kind of is what we were talking about with self-government, right?
Yep.
How we protect these rights. Well, as we talked about, government's duty, their job is to protect our rights and liberty. And we, the people's job, is to abide by just laws that we've given our consent to.
Yeah.
But also to hold accountable the government. And we do that through voting, local involvement. And there are some methods our founders use that we don't really use today that would be helpful. Just a sneak peek for some future episodes here. But committees of correspondence and other ideas, not quite that, but maybe a variation of that,
right.
These things that can
Same
help
principle,
right. Can help facilitate the people having a better, more effective voice in their, what's going on so they can better hold accountable those with authority.
Yeah.
But again, that's self-government. And as a community, we talked about it a little bit, but that needs to be meted out in another episode, which we definitely plan to do.
For sure.
So, that pretty much ties up our series on the concept of what a right is.
Yeah.
And just to recap, a right is a just claim to a thing that God has given to individuals that defends the individual from anyone else's or government's wrongdoing. Right? And then our list of fundamental rights that come from God. Again, it's so important. They can't come from government. They can't be whatever you decide it is.
At any given moment.
Right. That just becomes chaotic nonsense. And society, human flourishing ceases to exist when that happens.
Yeah.
But they come from God. And the ones we've looked at, and please, if any of our listeners, if you have some good ones and you're like, man, I can't believe you missed this huge fundamental one, please let us know.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to talk about it in another episode.
For sure. Absolutely.
But we've talked about life, property, liberty, self-defense, conscience, freedom of speech, and self-government. These are gifts from God that protect us from each other's wrongdoing, right? And without rights, just as we talked about, and it's just something that is just so fundamental. Without a system of rights, without rights from God, there is no system of justice.
Yep.
Right? No one can ever claim that they were wrong unless you actually had an objective true right from God, the Creator.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, just kind of as a general, I'm the history guy. You're also a history guy,
I am,
but we're
not like you.
equally love history. Just how I think one of the things that you see the more you study it is that this concept that people should have rights, or this concept that yes, people have rights, like the acknowledgement of people's rights, is not something that has always been like a given throughout history.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's that, I know that's like one of those cliches where it's sort of like, you just be grateful for the time you live, you know what I mean? Because back in my day we had, but in reality,
Nice voice.
yeah, thank you. But the reality is that like if you go back to ancient Rome, right, like you could be considered to have less rights than someone else simply by the family that you were born into.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of it, and it's just deal with it.
Right.
Except for the exceptions where then the people had to stand up and fight for some level of representation and, protection of their rights. But, or then you also have just endless examples of people trying to take people's rights.
Yeah.
And usually in the name of something good. It's usually saying, well, like, hey, for the betterment of the community, for the betterment of the people, like you don't need all these things because they don't actually push this agenda, or they don't push our like better, greater good of X, Y, Z, and so it's just one of those things of one, it, thinking of that, it promotes gratitude, right? The reality that we live in one of the freest societies that has ever existed, that acknowledges our rights more than many other societies, albeit not perfectly.
Nope. And we won't have perfection until Christ comes back.
Right. And then just to understand that it also sort of demands some level of involvement or some level of, and if not for you, this was a turning point for me. Was I was like, what does it mean for me? I don't know, whatever. I'll die and I'll go see Jesus and it'll be fine. Who cares if I have rights? But it's for your neighbor.
Yes.
It's for the person who might not know Jesus. And so their right to life is extremely important.
Absolutely.
And then also just like your friend or your brother in Christ or whatever it might be, is that like your responsibility to protect people's rights and to prevent the government from infringing upon those rights is founded in that concept of loving your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.